Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Capgemini webinar entitled Enabling AI and Real-Time Data to Provide Hyper-Personal Customer Experiences. Before we get started, I have a few items to note. Each of your phones are on mute and cannot be unmuted. If you have a question, you can confidentially type it into the Q&A tab. We're planning to have time reserved towards the end of today's session for addressing those questions. In your window, you can modify your settings to make the presentation screen bigger or to remove any of the windows you don't want to view. If you do experience some technical difficulties or technical issues on this call, we do have a support person online. Just submit your problem in the Q&A box and we will address it. And we will have the recording available afterwards, but certainly I encourage everyone that is able to engage the full time and to stay tuned in and ask questions that will help you get as much value as you can as possible from today's webinar. The webinar agenda is we'll have some welcoming remarks and introduction of speakers by Jim Langford. We'll talk about the digital transformation and key trends in the modern economy with Liz from Forrester. Dawn from Oracle will talk about Oracle's customer intelligence platform, and Christian will discuss AI and real-time data providing hyper-personalized customer experiences from Capgemini. Then at the end, as suggested, we'll have some wrap-up and Q&A. Jim, I'm going to be passing it over to you for the panelists' introductions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jackie. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. As Jackie mentioned, today we're going to have presentations from three leading experts in the industry. Liz Herbert, the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research, will talk about key trends and how real-time data and hyper-personalization can impact digital transformation to bring about better revenue growth and profitability. Don Springer, Oracle's Vice President of Product Management for the Marketing Cloud Group and leader of the CX Unity Product Management Team, will present why in today's economy it is important to have a 360-degree view of the customer and Oracle's solution for providing this capability. And Christian Erth, the Customer Experience Lead for Capgemini, who will discuss how Capgemini's premier retail solution leverages the Oracle CX Unity intelligent platform to draw customers to your store and have a positive experience, increasing sales and providing greater loyalty. Following the presentation, we will open up the lines for Q&A. If you have questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the text box on your screen and we will answer those during the Q&A. I will now turn it over to Liz. Liz?
Great, thanks Jim, and hi everybody. Thanks very much for joining us today. I know for some of you it's still pretty early in the day and others it's probably getting more towards lunchtime or even farther along if you're international. I wanted to just start out by sharing some details around what we see as Forrester. So Jackie, if you wouldn't mind just going to that next slide here. Great, thank you. One of the things that we as Forrester talk about a lot is that we are in a fundamentally new era. So you think of eras that have happened, manufacturing and the internet rise. We believe we're now in the middle of a very distinct and new era that we call the age of the customer. And what this really means is that more and more customers wield the power. There's so much transparency. There's so much ability for them to communicate with peers, hear peer feedback. Their expectations are being set from everywhere. So even if you're coming, to this webinar from a retailer, your customers are having their expectations set by also their bank and also their car dealer and also their airline experience and on and on and on. And what we see is that in this age of the customer experience is truly the cornerstone of business model shifts and also of growth and profit. We've got a lot of data points and we do a lot of surveys as you'd expect as an industry analyst firm like Forrester that show those companies that are doing the best on customer experience are generally growing the fastest and also more profitable. And there are lots of reasons for that, like advocacy and loyalty and better cross-sell, upsell, for example. Now, we also know that increasingly people recognize this. Forrester, we first started publishing about the age of the customer in 2012. I'd say that many other companies also now talk about this idea of customer obsession and the age of the customer, and that CX is a top focus for almost all organizations, and even more so for those who say that they want to be on the leading edge of what we typically call the digital business shift. But we also see that despite so many executives talking about CX as an important theme, that a lot of them just don't have what it takes to achieve great CX. And that goes across a lot of areas: systems, people, processes, metrics, goals, culture. And then I wanted to touch specifically on the idea of hyper-personalization, obviously the key theme for our time with you today. What we see is that to do this right, it requires a very broad and integrated view. When you think of our experiences as customers, and we all have them, it's not enough to just know the past, the purchase history. Obviously, that's what personalization was. But to know things like the tone of the customer on the phone, if they're frustrated or excited, to know other factors around, for example, third-party data, for example, what's going on in their area, or even with the weather can often play a role in retail. And so this is really a key challenge, is that it requires a broad and integrated view that spans many, many systems. So Jackie, if we could just go to the next slide, I'm going to show some data that clicks down a little bit more into how CX factors in for this bigger shift underway called digital transformation. You may be moaning and groaning. I think people have started to feel that phrase is a bit overused, but there's no doubt that there is something very, very different, that the pace of change is bigger than ever before, that companies have to work in new and different ways for them to be able to succeed. Pretty much everybody in these surveys, and this is a survey of about 1,700 different enterprises, they tell us that they're in the midst of a transformation. Many recognize that they'll sort of always be in a transformation of some sort. But when you look at what's going on here, that there's something interesting that I wanted to quickly point out. Improving the customer experience is a key driver, and it's a key business priority related to the shift to digital, but it's not any longer the top. And I point this out because as companies are thinking about how to invest in customer experience, and yet we're also having a lot of economic uncertainty around the world, in some places worse than others, reduced costs for the first time in the last 4 years has actually jumped ahead of improved the customer experience. So not only is customer experience still and always important, but also being efficient and cost effective with doing that is something that we're hearing from customers. So Jackie, if we could go to the next slide, thanks. I wanted to now show a little bit about what it really means to be a digital leader, because at the end of the day, hyper-personalization is a means to really achieve growth and success. And what we see is that companies who simply transform experience, this is really the 101. This is what we would call a beginner. Companies who can go farther than that, and they can use techniques and mechanisms like hyper-personalization to really transform business, or even to transform markets, which you can see in the blue on the right is a rare breed. Only 14% of companies that we've studied are truly advanced. That you will grow faster, that actually the farther along this curve that you can move, that the more you can become digital transformation leaders, the more that will show up in high revenue growth, which of course is really what we're all in business to do, is grow and succeed. Customer experience is just a piece of how to get there. So Jackie, if we could just go ahead one more. I now want to get a little bit deeper into CX and then personalization. Some of you may have seen this. We publish pretty regularly, but I just wanted to introduce what we see as the key metrics that drive customer experience. We publish the CX index across a lot of industries, including retail, so you may have seen it. But effectively, there are 3 key components of customer experience quality, and those are effectiveness, and that's all about delivering value. Hyper-personalization is a critical piece of that. Ease, how easy is it to work with the company? Hyper-personalization also plays a role there. And emotion. Customers need to feel good, and yet again, hyper-personalization plays a key role there. Why? Customer loyalty, retaining customers, enriching, and advocacy, and that's what circles back to things like growth and high profits. So hopefully that gives you a broad sense of what CX looks like and key metrics that companies think about. Now I'm going to move a little bit deeper, if we can go to the next slide, Jackie, on the personalization dimension here. Oh, I did want to quickly show you how retailers are doing. I know most of you are joining us from the retail industry, and so I did grab this snapshot from our most recent CX index. And the one thing I really wanted to point out on here, you can see a lot about where retailers as a whole fare well and fare worse on different metrics related to CX. But I wanted to highlight item number 4, respects me as a customer. That is the place where retailers on the whole are performing the worst. And this is a place where hyper-personalization is particularly important, because not only hyper-personalization can help achieve those 3 E's that I just showed of CX, quality, but also when you get hyper-personalization wrong, when you're giving someone an offer and they've got an outstanding complaint about, an item that ripped the first day they wore it, or something like this, or their product still hasn't arrived. They've ordered a nice new sweater for their holiday festivities and it's, lost somewhere in the supply chain. That's not the right time to upsell them and present them with new offers. And that often directly hurts this idea of being respected as a customer. So that's something I did want to call attention to, where I think hyper-personalization is very critical. But now moving ahead one, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into personalization here. And we can go ahead one more, Jackie. So what we see is that no retailer, no one really in any industry would say that they're not striving for personalization, and increasingly with what we can do, hyper-personalizations come into view. The benefits are touted as powerful. We see that personalization and hyper-personalization can result in great experience, loyalty, advocacy. But the reality is that these benefits are elusive for most. And you saw some of that in those CX index data points that I just showed. And we see that the approaches taken need to change. There's also new technology and new systems and things like AI and better ways to do data integration that play a role here. There are other elements, though, that are around philosophy, approaches, governance that also need to change to make this work. The technology alone won't solve all of these problems. And what we see actually is that some have overinvested on elements of personalization, but they're still not really getting the benefits. And although there's hope, we see a lot of difficulty as well. So if we can go ahead one more, I'm going to dive down a little bit farther into this. What we see is that new standards are being set all the time. Personalized experiences are now moving inevitably towards hyper-personalization. Actually, just as a side note, as Forrester, we don't always use the word hyper-personalization because it's just how people expect personalization should be, increasingly so. To do this right requires embracing a wide range of really next generation technologies that many companies are still struggling with, like mobile, like AI. And customers expect that any information, product, or service will be available. So the stakes are high. They also expect that it's helping them, not bombarding them. And like said, with the not feeling respected, the wrong touch can be detrimental. Let's go ahead one more, Jackie. So I'm not going to spend much time here. You can see our definition of personalization. And like I said, we don't tend to necessarily call out hyper-personalization anymore. It's moving that way. I also wanted to say that many companies associate customer obsession with hyper-personalization, but it's important to recognize that real customer obsession is so much more than just hyper-personalization. Succeeding in hyper-personalization on its own won't make you a customer-obsessed company, and that's a fallacy we see some companies slipping into. Let's go ahead one more, Jackie, please. So I wanted to now talk a little bit about retailers. Retailers, all of you have been eager to embrace personalization for a long time. Limited data remains a key challenge. This comes from some recent research our retail team did. We also see some of you are overly focused on web personalization, so that's something to watch out for. And be thoughtful. What are you measuring? We see that retailers are often saying that personalization is successful, but it's really just modest improvements to what they've done. And then most importantly, and really to the topic of today, watch out for cross-channel limitations and siloed organizational systems. This is not a new concept, but it's something where we still see a lot of issues. And it's got to tap into your back-end systems too, logistics, shipping, billing, and more. Jackie, let's go ahead one. So last data chart, and then I'll wrap up with some recommendations. I wanted to show you that, and this is sort of the click down on the points I was just saying. everybody's talking AI and data. That's a big theme at NRF, and it's a big theme that comes up regularly with our retail clients, and frankly, across all industries. It's a big theme with technology suppliers. But when we did this survey in 2019, in conjunction with NRF, and we asked which of the following are part of personalization strategy, you see that actually very traditional methods are rising to the top, that actually most retailers, some of you, this may look very familiar to your own situation, it's really revolving around emails. It's still not doing that much as far as things that are the other elements of their shopping experience, like when they're in the store, an electronic interaction on the mobile, or maybe a clienteling application. These are still areas that are largely not used or underutilized. So one last slide I want to show you. This is some recommendations on what steps you can take, and I know you'll be hearing more about this throughout the rest of our time together today. Some things we encourage as Forrester. Number one, make sure you can get real-time data from multiple sources. A lot of today's enterprise systems, they're still doing nightly batch updates or worse, and that's just not good enough when you want to engage with your customers in a smart way, be helpful to them, and not make them feel like you're not respecting them as a customer. So if something is lost in shipping and they've called about it earlier in the day, you need to know that before that next communication goes out. It seems simple, but a lot of companies aren't there yet. And we see there's more modern tools as well, like sentiment analysis tools, like in the call center, like being able to know if a pause in the conversation or a tone or people talking over each other is happening. That's an indicator of sentiment, and that needs to be incorporated into this theme of hyper-personalization. Number two, data strategy and AI approaches have to be built in. That can't happen as an afterthought. We see a lot of companies, they want to be agile and move quickly, but they leave things like this till it's too late, and they don't have a good approach there. That said, they also change over time. It's not fixed and set in stone. And unfortunately, a lot of companies still approach enterprise investments in that manner, that there's some sort of big go live, and they're not iterative enough. So people can go too far on either side. Third, trust and security are critical. Of course, we all hear about this every day, just opening up the newspaper or watching the news. Hyper-personalization can be a great thing, but it also can very quickly cross into creepy or even illegal territory. We're doing a lot of work as Forrester on our security and risk team, looking at implications of privacy and other areas, including the law as it relates to hyper-personalization. And then finally, like said at the beginning, just to close out on this point, it is a necessary component of CX, but it is not the only component. Don't over-rotate, don't over-pivot, because just getting this right alone is not going to make you a leading customer experience-oriented, customer-obsessed company. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks very much, and I'll be around for questions in a little bit.
Okay, so we'll turn it over to Don.
Great. Good day for everybody. Next slide, please. So at Oracle, we've been shifting a bit in our approach across all of our CX applications to really embrace this new concept that we're seeing as enterprises move to what we call an experience economy. What we find is that the experience is what is now defining the value for most brands and most organizations. This experience needs to happen across journeys that are very nonlinear and very unpredictable. People don't follow similar paths anymore. They follow their own passion, their own research items. And then finally, customers are innovating so dramatically with how they interact using mobile, using different channels, what their demands are, how they want to be serviced, that companies that don't start making this shift are in danger of being left behind and becoming uncompetitive. Next slide. So we've done some research across a variety of consumers across all different types of demographics and psychographics. And this one was something that has been confirmed, I think, for several years now, but many customers will never come back to you if they have a bad experience. And that is something that, continues to propagate. Maybe it'll stay at this level, maybe it gets higher. Next slide. The things that were interesting in our research that we did recently is that for those that get experience right, you can charge a premium. And so rather than thinking about, well, how do I position my brand as luxury versus mid-market versus lower end. It's more the experience that's driving what you can actually achieve as a price. And so this is very interesting. And so when you start thinking about how you're setting yourself up for better customer experience and personalized experiences, understanding this means you don't have to just do discounts to kind of move the needle in sales and stuff like that. You can actually do things that are very, very compelling to go there. And the next slide kind of gets into that more. Certain age bands on the next slide shows that the novel experience is what Gen Z and millennials are really allowing themselves to get brand attachment to. And so it's not just a cool factor, a hip factor. It's just, if I have a great, unique experience, I'm going to pay a lot more too. So I think this, as we work with a lot of executives, they're going through the digital transformations, thinking about the shift to customer experience. It's not just what kind of technologies and how you improve your organization to deliver those. You've got to think about, well, what do we stand for now? And a lot of our more successful companies that are winning in their industries have really made that shift where it's not just about being the best digital marketer, it's really being the best customer experience company. Next slide. So the real big challenge that we found and what we're looking to solve now as we kind of launched a new product called CX Unity into the marketplace is to do personalization well, to get better customer insights, to do it all in real time. It's really, you need data. And even for AI to work, the biggest challenge we're seeing enterprises have is having access to clean data. So as I think was mentioned earlier, it's not just a first-party data issue. You've got to really be thinking about, how do I get data from the sources that allow me to understand customer intent, interest, perspective from any channel, whether it be inside your own organization or outside in the web in general. So it's really integrating together first, second, third-party data, and then pulling it all together so you have it at fingertips of any CX function organization so they can take action on it. Next slide, if you can. Okay, and the results are big. And so this is a study that was done recently by McKinsey. Working with firms like Capgemini, I would say some of these things can actually double as you get into a more savvy area of hyper-personalization or true, less generic, less segmented-based components in your email or your site personalization, what you're doing in mobile to really drive it. But it really is lifting revenue significantly. So those that actually go on this journey and start embracing, collecting the data, getting intent signals and understanding how to activate on those can lift revenue, just at some fairly basic levels of 5 to 15%. But, again, we could see it going upwards of 20 to 30. Efficiency is happening at a great pace. You don't have to have humans doing as much anymore. You can automate a lot of the things that happen repetitively. And if you can kind of target better and even integrate or blend advertising and marketing together as you think about the different known audiences, known segments, known people, customers that you're interacting with, you can actually reduce your acquisition costs and still get the same type of results. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about what our vision and strategy as we go to market. Next slide. So our vision is that we see a future, and we're bringing customers to this now, where it's not just a marketing thing. Marketing's leading the charge when it comes to customer experience, but it's really, how do you use data? How do you use modeling and decisioning so that your marketing starts to appear more and more invisible? As the customer's moving through this unpredictable nonlinear journey, are you delivering messages, content, information, and experience that's incredibly natural and contextual, seems almost seamless? We're working with a lot of companies right now that are moving towards predictive service, or at least real-time service. Flight disruption. Who's on that flight? What's their loyalty status? How do we actually take care of certain customers ahead of before something they realize that the problem's happening? And how do you do that before, a kayak or some other type of calendaring tool tells the person, when you can actually tell them from a brand perspective? And finally, sales. The ability to buy really any way people choose, any way they want to, et cetera. And again, we think the real key on this is that it's really the data and the signal detection to allow you to build these kind of higher levels of intelligence and activation. Next slide, please. So when we look across how we do this, it all starts with having a better approach from how you think about your customer master And I'll talk more about this next generation kind of CDP, which we call Customer Intelligence Platform, or CIP, that allows you to integrate all your data from inside, outside your four walls to kind of get to a point that you can actually have the data at your fingertips and ready to take decisioning on. The second layer is that you have to get a customer profile that is 360, completely unified, so you can take action on the signals as they come in. This requires a very sophisticated approach to an ID graph and identity resolution, so that no matter where that signal comes, as long as you have the permission from a known perspective, or in some cases, even when they're anonymous, to kind of communicate the right messages that you're allowed to, that's going to allow you to kind of do things as well. And again, never throw this data away, because you can use this data as you train new forms of AI modeling and decisioning as well. Enrichment's important as well. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of take a unified profile, connect it to different type of third-party data sources, and bring back enormous amounts of enrichment, as well as do a variety of things from a scoring perspective to put some of those things like propensity to churn, propensity to buy, RFM, et cetera, actually as an attribute attached to the profile, again, available in real time so you can take action on it. We're now in a world where we're blending together ad tech and martech together so that all channels can be used holistically and optimally, as opposed to having separate forms of how you do audience for acquisition versus how you actually do the marketing for engagement and even using it for conversion. And then this leads to real-time CX. So no matter if it's service, support, sales, commerce, marketing, everybody has all this information available in real time, so they can actually be the ones, if they're in front of a customer, to deliver that exceptional customer experience. Next slide, please. So this is really kind of an architecture of how we're doing that. I'm not going to go into too much detail. There's two different paths, depending on if you're doing direct to consumer or you're doing business to business. When I talk about different forms of enrichment, we're actually integrating what we're doing from a customer intelligence perspective, not just with that transactional demographic data, signal information from within inside the four walls, but again, outside in the third-party domain. It's allowing us to kind of help accelerate how do you move from an anonymous-based visitor or customer to what we call known, and how do you kind of handle the people in between those stages? And then how do you start taking real-time actionals, do digital personalization, move to forms of dynamic content delivery, dynamic content assembly across the different CX experiences. Next slide. And this comes together with our, what we consider an enterprise-grade kind of CDP, or really next generation of what customer data platforms are doing, which is really a customer intelligence platform. So baking a lot of intelligence, baking a lot of this AI into the actual way you kind of structure your data and assemble the data so it can really be used anywhere you need to take these customer experiences. Next slide. This is a process of how you can think about a continuous flywheel spinning that gets faster and faster and gets more and more robust, more and more kind of pervasive across the whole organization. But it's really always looking at, as I create this unified profile, how do I use that to amplify personalization? How do I, over time, move from having unknown customers to known? And then how do I enrich that data to help people kind of continue to kind of move down a path towards hyper-personalization? Next slide. If we go digger into the platform, this is as deep as I'll go today. This is kind of the layers of how it comes together. So having the right data connectors to really access any data source system, be it transactional, be it third party, be it from getting behavioral data, et cetera, how do you connect into these things and being able to push the data in real time that you need to have access to, or as fast as those systems can get the data to you? And then I've talked before about unifying advertising and marketing together. We actually are bringing together the DMP and a CDP so that data is flowing interchangeably between the two, and then based on how you manage your data governance and consent management, allowing only data to go to an end system to take action upon it. We're baking a lot of intelligence into this product. I've mentioned before identity resolution, ID graphs, et cetera. But we have a lot of things around enrichment, quality, et cetera. I'll let you look at some of these things. All of it to try to improve data intelligence so that you can take action upon your customers. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of what kind of data we're talking about, There's demographic data, which everybody pretty much knows with the customer data management platforms or their customer hubs. We start moving in all the transactional data and then blend it together with behavioral data. If you consider what a lot of the first point solutions did in CDP, most of them came from tag management solutions, kind of migrated into certain types of behavioral data, put a data lake behind it. They tended to do only the right-hand side, which works, I think, for intermediate forms of personalization. But again, if you can get all the data blended together through a unified profile, you actually have the data fuel to drive how you want to do a lot of your personalization with more sophisticated AI, model building, et cetera. Next slide, please. And then this is a simple kind of process of what happens as you're going through improving your data quality, enriching your data. And then we've built in a variety of tools that can do segmentation by humans, segmentation on the fly with AI, a lot of analytics, a lot of ability to start to set up some of your initial engagement or actions. But I think it's really the bookends that are interesting. These are the systems that typically people want to pull in to this customer 360 view. A lot of our early customers on this platform are seeing this as a way to kind of become a data distribution hub that extends some maybe investments they made with data streaming, but now to have a singular source that not only brings in data from source systems or systems of records, can do all this enrichment, this scoring, this intelligence, this signal detection, and then send it back out to systems that want to take action on it. So we actually make the systems of record better. We actually make the ability to do AI engagement better as well. We're very open on this. We don't care where the source systems come from. To the right, we have a lot of our own products and solutions that we can integrate this data to. But frankly, any CX application system you can do through our real-time API to basically drive action. So that's a big deal on this, is that it's the real-time action capability that's enabled when you get this data put together and done right. Next slide, please. So when we think about it, it's not just a marketing function. It's really pulling all this data together with a very robust, highly accurate, which means high precision, high recall capability on identity matching into a known person, so that all that data is available then to take action no matter where you are inside the customer experience function across the organization. Next slide. So I want to talk about how we think you need to think as an enterprise approaching this kind of data approach to enabling hyper-personalization, personalization, advanced intelligence, insights, et cetera. Identity resolution, we think, is paramount. You can't be sending or wasting dollars and spend or getting bad experiences because you don't have the right identity resolved to a known person. So this is paramount. We think it's important enough that we've invested in our approach on this. We spent, hundreds of millions of dollars, continue to invest a lot of this to get to the best in the world kind of capability on this. And again, it's that blending of first, second, third party identity into a unique person and then being able to leverage all that signal data to take action upon it. One of the other things we've done is really developed an out-of-the-box industry schema that is more geared towards this need for digital transformation and digital customer experience, that then allows people not to be looking at a blank screen and figure out how you're going to design your schema. You just got to configure it. You can customize it a little bit, and it allows you to get up and running versus previous data lake projects in a matter of a few weeks, as opposed to taking maybe 6 months or even longer to get there. It's very open, APIs. Any third-party person can build things inside this product. They can integrate data in this product, so we're very open about where we work with. Frankly, all the enterprises work with a lot of different vendors, and so again, we're not forcing a black box or only use our stuff perspective. Speed is important, real-time access and storing, and I mean real-time. We measure things in milliseconds. Even when we're running segments that are very, very complex, it's taking multiple seconds, but we're talking about massive amount of attributes. So imagine dealing with maybe hundreds of attributes on different customers as you're building up your segments, and then using AI to kind of help determine it. That's kind of the speed we're talking about. So it's not just access to data, it's actually access to processing in the models that we put inside this. Scale, most customers, we start with 4 terabytes of data. We can easily go to 8. What that means is you never have to throw any data away. It's always available for you. So if you're seeing changes in life stage, lifestyle, different intent signals. It doesn't matter if it's short-term, long-term, all that data is there at scale, so you never have to throw it away. We support the entire customer experience journey, and then we bake in all this intelligence so that you don't have to worry about some of how to get intelligent or smart data into your system. We'll take care of that for you. If you have new ideas, we put those in as well. It's more, how do I take this data and then use it to build my own forms of AI and decisioning as well. So that's the conclusion of what I have today. I will pass it over to the next person.
Great, thanks, Don. Christian?
Thank you, Don and Liz and Jim. Folks, I'm Christian Arendt. I'm with Capgemini. I lead the CX capability here. Next slide, please. I'll power through these so we can get to some QAs fairly quickly. And I will definitely, what I have to share will support everything that has been shared previously. Next slide, please. So these are some of the, I wanted to share with you folks, these are some of the top trends that we're seeing from our clients in the market, which are consistent with what we're hearing from Liz and Don. Obviously, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is subscriptions, and I'm going to delve into that a little bit more. But clearly, the primary theme we're seeing is around data. And data truly is the connecting thread, and data is the primary piece of hyper-personalization. And as Liz said, it's not the only thing, but it is definitely one of the most important things. And then, with that data, we can use, working with Oracle, as we are part of the Oracle practice, we can use Oracle's artificial intelligence technology and the tuning that our data scientists bring to bear to be able to improve the customer experience and provide better personalization, hyper-personalization. Next slide. As has been discussed, the customer journey is really not linear anymore, and those who think that it is, I'll keep going through it. It is becoming unpredictable and crazy, if you will. One more. There's a bit of a click through where people are entering into that customer experience from a variety of directions. They're coming in through the commerce portal, or they have an issue, or for whatever direction they're coming in. The customers want to be able to connect with companies easily and quickly, and not in a linear fashion. It's changed and is changing, and as was seen by Liz in a lot of the data and the research they're doing, it's also changing across probably cultures and age groups, if you will. We see, with Gen Zs versus millennials versus older population. People are expecting a good customer experience, nonetheless, whatever age, across the board. And as we learn how to use these tools and become more savvy with technology, we are not following a linear pattern. Next slide. So, from one of the things we're focused on at Capgemini is really helping our clients drive growth. And I will say, and I didn't add this here, but Liz mentioned that cost cutting has jumped ahead of the customer experience for the first time in 4 years. We're also seeing that similar kind of a trend. But growth, nonetheless, our clients are being judged by the streets, by their investors, their shareholders, how well they're growing. And so one of the things we're doing within the customer experience practice is looking at how data and intelligence can drive that growth. Next slide. So as has been discussed, that data and intelligence really truly equal the best customer experience. And actually, to this end, I've been working very closely with Don and his team at Oracle, helping them roll out from an implementation side the new Oracle CX Unity product that Don has discussed. Next slide, if you will. Okay, let's move into some of the solutions that we're working on. But just for a few more minutes, we'll kind of power through this. As we're talking about retail today, next slide, please. We have a solution we built. We actually built it a few years ago, but we're just back one, if you would. We're back two, if you would. We're building out a solution for retailers to address the changing dynamics in the buying process. And this Clienteling app is actually an application, an app we built for tablets and mobile devices. so that a retailer can walk around and identify in specific ways, maybe not every single customer in the store, but walk around in the store, let's say an associate can walk around in the store and identify, again, not everybody, but some people, like let's say Christian Erith, and he's in Gap and he's interested in buying a specific pair of jeans or a sweater or a sport coat or a pea coat or whatever. And this is actually a real scenario recently. And when the associate with this app, the associate could walk up to me and say, hey, these are your past buying patterns. Based on your past buying patterns, and of course they would use those terms, but based on that information, they would be able to help recommend to me clothing that I'm looking for in that specific example. And so this is truly an integrated mobile system and provides actionable intelligence in the moment. Liz mentioned, in fact, that a lot of stores, and we've seen this as well, a lot of retailers are still kind of stuck, if you will, in the email side from the marketing perspective, and they're not leveraging some of the in-store functions and capabilities and tactics that they could use. And so this clienteling app is one way we're trying to push our clients to change that, the behavior of their associates, and be there at the moment the client needs them. Next slide, please. This next slide is just an overview of what this tool contains across these functions, and it is tightly integrated with Oracle, and we're in the process of building out the integration with CX Unity. Again, this tool enables associates to cross-sell, upsell, and it is a smart guide for customers to view that product catalog really on their phone from the client's app as well, so we can integrate within clients' apps as well. Next slide. So something else that really, like I said, hasn't been too discussed and is one of the top trends we're seeing is around subscription management. And we actually use Oracle and implement Oracle Subscription Cloud. This is a big deal for the B2C, the business to consumer market, in retailers in general. We're also seeing a big uptick from the B2B side of companies, especially B2B2C, right? So companies that perhaps sell a product to a channel, which then sells it to consumers. The idea of being able to buy things incrementally or subscribe to them, rent it, that kind of approach in a recurring business model is extremely appealing to our clients. And this actually has direct effect on how people and the ability for consumers to acquire products and goods and services. This is no longer just a service like a Spotify, music service, a music download service, or the myriad of services we see in the internet. This is something where hard quality products, including automobiles, where you subscribe to an automobile and 1 week you want a sports car and the next week you want a truck or an SUV to go to the mountains to go skiing. So we're seeing this across the board. Next slide, please. We, as you can see, subscription, the ecosystem touches both the front office and the back office. This is a key thing, especially in let's say a support center or a telesales center where you're signing up customers. You're able to immediately push that information into the back office to get the billing going and so forth. Next slide, please. And then finally, as I mentioned briefly earlier, we are very tied to the hip with Don and his team, helping them roll out the CX Unity product. We are very focused on data, and so when Oracle announced this product over a year ago, it was very exciting for us because this was a direction we were already going and had done some of these kinds of customer data platform types of implementations from scratch in our past. And with the solution with Oracle CX Unity, we're now involved in helping drive our customers towards hyper-personalization and, as Liz mentioned, doing it right and the right processes necessary for that. Go ahead, next slide, please. And I'm nearly done here. And then this is just a little bit more about the practice in which I lead. We are a digital customer experience practice. We have 5 core areas that we're focused on. As you can see, I don't have to read each of those, but the bottom line is we help and enable our clients to, if you will, do it right across sales, marketing, sales, service, e-commerce, and so forth. Next slide, if you will. And the next slide talks about those specific areas in which we're focused. And obviously, data is one of the keys here, along with the ability from the bottom up, building in data to the process as the right process, is necessary for the top quality, best customer experience. And data drives, obviously, AI helps with that as well, and data drives that best customer experience. And final slide here, next slide. We want to be your partner, so I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Jim for Q&A.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, Jackie, do you want to open up the lines and see if we have any questions out there?
Hi, Jim. Actually, we had a couple questions come in. And the first one, and I'll certainly direct this to Liz, and Liz, you can answer it, and certainly some of the other panelists, please do jump in. One of the questions we got are, where are companies prioritizing in enterprise software purchases to succeed with personalization?
Yeah, it's a important question because there is not just software that may directly be used for hyper-personalization, but also software that is part and parcel. So like all of us have mentioned the idea of, real-time data. So really all systems need to be able to enable that. And so, a few key themes that we're seeing. Number one, the shift to the cloud. We're finding that cloud generally is architected for much more of a real-time, better economies of scale in terms of things like data volume, which of course Don has talked about today. And then also the idea of very extensible systems that are easy to integrate. So we're seeing a big rise in things like microservices architectures and marketplaces where you can actually get a lot of that third-party data more seamlessly hooked into some of your core systems that are ultimately going to be a key part of the hyper-personalization effort. So, those are a few key things that I would say. So, cloud, being underpinning a lot of these other themes, such as scalability and also ease of use in real time. Extensibility is a big one. And then, of course, experience, right? We see that really to make these work, things have to be easier to use. You see a lot of marketers, for example, they want much more self-service tools than what they may have been equipped with in the past. So those are a few of the key principles, just to keep it somewhat short.
That's great. Anybody else from the panelists would like to address that question, or we do have another one, of course, as well. Okay, so there was a second question that came in, and again, I'll open this up to the panelists, and certainly Liz, feel free to jump on this. Where do companies use partners in personalization? We talked and saw some slides from Christian about where Capgemini potentially can help, but where are you seeing that engagement happen?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few big themes. I mean, I think generally partners are used pretty broadly, and different companies have their own feelings and experiences about, where to outsource and where not, and where to use consultants and where not. But, definitely for a lot of companies, this is really new territory. They're dealing with so much change. They're dealing with really new pressures. And a lot of our clients, they are looking for outside help in really designing those right customer experiences. So we see a lot of companies are looking for what I'll call CX consulting, very broad, strategic, where will we get the most bang for our buck? What specifically do we need to do? Because even within a somewhat defined topic like hyper-personalization, there are a lot of different angles to that and ways that can be invested. So there are definitely many customers who are investing in kind of that strategy. I'll call it strategy consulting or design work, experience design around customer. But we also see that a lot of companies realize, like, hey, this isn't really my core competency, and they may be looking more for a longer term partner where there's somebody who can really help them with CX management longer term, help them with systems management longer term, especially because there are a lot of new technologies that are out there, like machine learning, like AI, generally, like even the new products that are evolving to the cloud, and companies just don't have the skills. In fact, one of the challenges we've seen for a lot of companies who generally want to hire and grow skills themselves, that's their mentality, it's hard to even retain them, because right now we're in this era where once you have people comfortable with those skills, they're being poached. And so, that just adds another challenge to it. So that's another commonplace. And then data providers, sometimes this is kind of your core classic service providers. In other cases, these are very specialized providers. But a lot of our clients, they recognize that there's a role services partners can play in compiling or even doing some of the analysis on data, particularly the data that's a critical required part, but not necessarily unique to you or differentiating. Why reinvent the wheel? So that would be a third category that I would bring up here.
Yeah, and Christian, kind of on that topic, Christian, we had a question around, in terms of the clienteling app, where does that targeted at, and what type of clients may that be useful for?
No, great question. Let me kind of add to the previous question, and then I'll address yours, Jackie. But I wanted to say what we've seen is, and Liz, I think you nailed it. And we've actually made acquisitions in this area. We've seen that companies want a partner that really knows not just the technology. Sort of we traditionally have been really good at implementing technologies, and we've got the processes for implementation, and now it's agile. We're in the agile world and all that, and so that's all good, and we're very sound in that area. What companies really want, and Liz, I think you said this, is they want an organization that has not just the technology side, but the sort of the agency side. And we've made some acquisitions as a company, Capgemini has, around this agency capability. And what is that? That's more the marketing service, providing the solid feedback and recommendations, and even helping with campaigns. And let's say from the agency perspective in the marketing world, but it's not just marketing, it's other aspects. And how can, from an agency perspective, which is deep business process, deep into the mind of the consumer, and enabling our clients to become customer centric and customer obsessed, as you said, how can we as an organization bring to bear the right technology for that level of customer obsession that is required for that particular organization? And then to your question, Jackie, about the clienteling app, what we've seen is really this clienteling app was originally designed for, like I mentioned, Gap as one example, or other companies that have in malls and in stores like that. Now we haven't really gone to the point where this would be from the mass merchandiser perspective, like a Walmart or Target, but it certainly could be. Ideal kind of companies where this was designed was where there's customers that truly need that level of high touch. And I'm thinking of like a electronics retailer, and you can think of those that exist out there where customers are walking around and they're just not sure, do I need an i3 or i5 or i7 laptop? And I just went through this with my daughter, or am I, what kind of television do I need, based on the size of my room? And people don't think about those things. And so this clienteling app would really be ideal for those scenarios in whatever retail setting. The other nice thing is the clienteling app will enable our clients who have apps, in themselves, where a customer can log into an app and look at their account and stuff like that. This will provide an added technology to help from the associate side within the framework of those apps. And by the way, on the back end, we're sending this information into the customer data platform, the intelligence platform, to build additional intelligence and provide next best recommendations. So that's how we see that.
Yeah, and there was another question in the Q&A box around, we heard Liz talk about cost, and that's really become one of the highest priorities. Liz, can you just drill down on that for another second or two around what is the breakdown, acquisition, turnover, maintenance costs? Like, I think they're really trying to understand where these costs are coming from.
Like as it relates to software, is that how you see that question coming through?
Yes.
I think it's a huge question, so it's hard to really get into a lot of detail on it. But, I think actually one of the things we're noticing with Forrester clients, and we do a lot of business case work, as I know pretty much everyone on the call does too, it's very hard to measure some of the costs with the way that technology has shifted. So like a lot of our clients, they're still thinking in a very classic mentality of like, well, how much did I spend on hardware and hardware refreshes and then software licenses and maintenance and things like this. But, especially with the shift to these more modern ways of working, there's much more of a community and ecosystem approach. There are definitely cost shifts. Much of the traditional infrastructure and support is now subsumed into the subscriptions with major SaaS and packaged apps vendors. And that's a big shift. I think it's also been hard for a lot of our clients to track the real cost of the people time because, especially with this idea of self-service, which I mentioned earlier, very common in line of business, that they're taking on tasks that were classically IT. And so I find with a lot of clients that I work with, it's hard to estimate those costs. So, that's another big bucket to think about. But all of that said, and obviously we talked a lot about how, cost is very much in view, and particularly in view given the economic uncertainty. All of that said, we really work hard with our client base to shift that conversation more towards value. Because one of the things, there's a lot of ways you could run your tech stack cheaper. It's very unlikely to give you the most value. So what we see is really trying to balance, and you kind of saw in those numbers I showed, balance the cost with the value, with experience, with revenue growth, with some of these other, metrics or barometers for growth. And, I think that's where companies also get tripped up because a lot of these new systems, they're continually innovated. That's part and parcel of the cloud. They're much more ecosystem oriented. So not only data that maybe is supplied on a cloud ecosystem, which is more and more common, but also things like being able to share with your peers. Like, if you're one of these large retailers who owns lots of different stores and brands, and you maybe run separate systems because of acquisition history or just because of design choices, how can you use the new technology to share across? And cloud enables us to do that pretty seamlessly because everyone's on the same version and in real time. So these are just examples, but I think the key is, yes, there are these new ways of having to look at costs, but be careful not to over pivot on costs when thinking about really business value, customer experience, and not only survival, but also differentiation in the retail sector.
Great. And Dawn, one of the questions that came in was around time frame for a customer to complete a digital experience along that personalization target. And I know, Liz, you may have a perspective on that, but Dawn, how would you address that in terms of time frame and how that journey kind of progresses?
So what we've been seeing is that to get the data model schema configured and data loaded could take 4 to 6 weeks. Once you have the data in, segmentation can start. And I think when we see people doing personalization, we're seeing a blended approach between personalization and segmentation. And what I mean by that is as you start moving from fewer to more segments that are more intent, interest oriented, some content can be personalized by a person being a member of a segment. And then some of the components inside that message or that content is where that one-to-one personalization can persist. And so we think that you can get value very quickly by understanding you're on a journey to get more and more targeted segments with elements of one-to-one personalization built into your messaging. And that could take months, if not years, to get all value. But we see lift rates with people just within the first, 3-4 months of upwards of, 10+% in lift rates, either on click-throughs or conversions. And if you really are driving for revenue, you focus on the conversion piece because that's where you can get kind of additional revenue.
That's great. Liz, any comments on that from your perspective in terms of the overall landscape around timeline to do this?
So I think it depends on, so I know that those are some examples of metrics. I think with a lot of our clients, it depends on the broader issues and also, of course, things like how big they are. So a lot of our clients, even though it could be done quickly, they struggle with organizational issues in decision, political issues, budgeting issues. Some clients still budget like annually, and that can be a limiting factor. So, that I would just reiterate a point I brought up earlier, which is it's more than just the technology and the systems. For a lot of companies, they have to fundamentally change the way they work, the way they think, the way they budget, the way they govern initiatives like this, and work differently. Because even though all of that is possible, I'd say in reality, some of our customers still struggle just because of the political and organizational factors that are there.
That's
Jackie,
great.
I'd like to add. I'd just like to add from the cost perspective, what we've done from an implementation side to help our clients reduce cost is it's cloud. So by virtue of that, normally it should be, in almost every case it is, less costly to implement. And B, we've created accelerators and tools that help advance the implementation time along within an agile process to make the implementation time shorter. The other thing we're very conscientious of is in terms of cost is as the value, as Liz has mentioned, we're focused on the value because we don't just say, here's the cost for the implementation. We also say, here's your long-term outlook and what you can expect with this solution. And what's really interesting, we're seeing our clients come sort of with their tails between their legs, coming to us saying, hey, can you implement this cloud solution? Because we've really got burned in the past, in years past, implementing, these massive on-prem CRM solutions where it's so customized that they can hardly upgrade without undoing so many changes, and so they come back to, we want to adopt the cloud as out of the box as possible, and so that helps reduce the cost as well.
Yeah, we are at the top of the hour, and I know we're 1 or 2 minutes over. We have one more question for Liz, and then certainly, Liz, happy if you can address it. One of the questions was, do we have any stats on tangible benefits from interactions with customers that have gone along that digital transformation line with personalization? So I'm sure you have a ton of them. Is there 1 or 2 key ones that you'd want to point to?
Yeah, I don't have any just in my mind. We, like I said, we do have some research there. So, many of you who have joined today are Forrester clients. I'm sure we have a very heavy client base in retail. So please feel free to reach out. And I'm sorry to say I don't have any just off the top of my head prepared.
No, that's great. I think we're going to be ending the webinar now. Thank you to all of the panelists. We had a great discussion. Thank you to all of the attendees. We will be following up with an email that you can go ahead and get today's slide deck and presentation, as well as we'll make available some of the contact information of the panelists if you'd like to follow up further. So thank you all very, very much and enjoy the rest of the day.